super, že ste tu. Čauko. Luiza, thanks for coming and thanks for sharing. I have just a few questions before we open this up to a broader discussion, because I feel like it makes sense to more engage with everyone rather than us talking. And but I maybe have like 2 or 3 questions. One of them is maybe easy but also complicated at the same time. The project is called Topography of Excesses, and I would maybe want to ask about the excess, what excess means to you, why you use it, and what kind of potential to you there is in an excess.
I think I ended up with this idea also coming from my personal experiences of living in Germany and the kind of like, as a Brazilian living in Germany, the kinds of things that I've been through. You know, I'm a light-skinned Brazilian, which gives me a lot of, actually a lot of privilege in that sense. But at the same time, there is this constant, relentless sexualization that is projected by men abroad onto Brazilian bodies in general. And I guess like feminized or read as Brazilian bodies and specifically. And so many times it's like a collection of experiences, you know, being told that we're too loud, or that we're too emotional, or that we're too, you know, too much, or that we're making a huge issue out of this. It's not that serious when, you know, somebody is really targeting you because you are who you are, because where you come from, the place that you come from. So I think the idea of excess really came from like this constellation of experiences, really. Yeah, I think that's like one. Yeah.
But also, I have a feeling within the exhibition, and also like within your talk, that you use the idea of excess as a space that sort of transgresses normality. That's like,
yeah,
from that it feels weird or like different, or it's usually read as other. But it also has this kind of potential that you're using. So I was interested in if you could expand on the potential that is somehow entrenched in excess as you understand it.
Well, to me, I think I was also very interested, and this is something I guess I've been trying to explore through works that ended up not being included in this presentation. But I'm very interested in how, you know, this experience of being read as excessive is not something that is exclusive to Brazilians, of course, and it's a kind of effect of colonizing and, of course, racializing processes that happen differently to different people coming from different places. So. You know, this thing of being told that we're too loud or something, it's quite a common experience to like a lot of people that I know, a lot of people of color that I know that live in Germany and also in other places in Europe, the US, and so on. And to me, I wanted to look into the space of excess, or as a space where we could really meet, and a space of intersection, really, because it's so contradictory, because at the same time you're seen as lacking something, lacking the I don't know, really the humanity, lacking the humanity of whiteness. You're seen as lacking the cultural background that is considered, you know, acceptable, and at the same time too much. You're like Schrödinger's foreigner or something. And so yeah, I was interested in doing that, and I think this project is, of course, quite personal. I look into, you know, in other works that are not here because time constraints. I look into personal histories in my family too, related to these things. But in other work that I've been developing kind of outside of this project, I also end up looking into that. There's a project, for instance, that I did last year that I'm quite happy with. It's called A Topography, and it's an online project too, where we, with a friend, I did it with a friend, Daniel Rourke, and basically what we did is we started the project during an arts festival in the Azores Islands, like in the middle of the Atlantic, and it was a public art project where basically I had a lot of fun defacing Portuguese symbols of colonialism. I did not commit crimes, please don't report me. But yeah, it was basically a project where I don't know, Daniel's from the UK, but it was quite personal to do this in the Azores, you know, Portuguese territory. So it started with us really disrespecting all of these symbols of Portuguese colonialism as a public art piece, and then we took this project online and invited artists from different places, Pakistan, Palestine, Aotearoa, which is New Zealand, all kinds of places to discuss and to kind of run over each other's contributions. The website is like a bunch of layers. A lot of them are GIFs. I'm very fascinated by GIFs, if you haven't noticed at this point. Basically people run over each other in like this potentially endless conversation about what colonialism means in each context. So it's, yeah, it's, I think it's also one way, it's very excessive. The product, it looks completely crazy at this point. And yeah, I think that's also a way of exploring that in dialogue with different people.
Making the excess more excessive.
Yeah.
And this is actually something that I've been thinking about a lot because of me working in culture and being a cultural producer and a curator. And how do we actually use the space of art for social change? Is it not futile? Because very often I feel like people who are striving through art and culture to make a change have a feeling like it's just, there's a big sort of burnout syndrome of how much we can contribute to social change or to rethinking social phenomena, I feel very often. Mm-hmm. But, so I wanted to more like ask you how you perceive the space of art and what kind of space that is to you and how we can mobilize it or how you mobilize it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think one conversation that I had last year in a residency with an amazing artist called Dale Harding was something that I kept with me so much. And Dale is an amazing artist from Australia. He's Indigenous Australian, and we met at this residency in Sweden, and we were having this conversation, like getting to know each other. And at some point, he asked me, "Is anyone else in your family an artist?" Because I had told him that I had never called myself an artist before, actually, like there, you know, that residency. And I told him, no, because being an artist is not something that was ever accessible for us in Brazil and for, you know, where I come from. It's not realistic, really. And so but I told them, yeah, but my mom, she always liked to sew. She used to make clothes for all the family because it was cheaper than buying. And my grandma, she taught me to knit and to do like crochet, which I'm terrible at. And my grandfather, he used to do a specific type of improvisation poetry that is typical from the region that he comes from in northern Brazil. And he was like, so they're all artists. And it was that moment when it was like, oh my God, I'm talking about decolonization and I'm thinking about all those things, but my very definition inside my head of what art is very colonial, because I'm tying being an artist to being inside a gallery or a museum or something like that. And it was, when the little light goes on in your head and you're like, oh my God, that is so true. And we were having such like this amazing conversation. He was telling me about how, Dale is he's a very very successful artist, really. Like he was like in biennials and he's in museums and everything. But he was telling me about how in his family there are so many artists. Like his mom does this and his cousin does that, and this kindness, really, and this, I don't know, he's an amazing person, and the kindness of his approach to this really stuck with me, and yeah.
I think it's very similar when we think of different practices that, like I very often think in Prague also, or in the display, how to be sort of accessible, so also like how to have a lot of people that can be expert by experience, not only experts by academia or experts by like high, class experts, how to be a part of the conversation. So I think I understand that, like, looking for specific practices that you don't perceive as suitable for the art space, or for fitting, or for intellectual enough, or for smart enough, or for artistic enough is a big job that we also have to do. And that maybe comes hand in hand with also one thing that you were saying, that a lot of this work of decolonizing whatever sphere of life we're like trying to look at through a decolonial lens is very exhausting and brings a lot of burnout and a lot of like pain and vulnerability. But on the other hand, it brings a lot of joy, a lot of solidarity, a lot of being together, and maybe being together in ways that where we have to really challenge ourselves and be together in a more honest way. And I would, before we open the discussion to everyone, I would be interested in maybe points of this joy that make you happy, where you find these points of joy, because when you were also within your presentation, a lot of those things are extremely heavy. They're also very much connected to your country, to your family, so it runs through your female lineage, it runs through the country, and in this very depressing moment of that, of Brazil's political history, it's probably even more painful. So I would like to know how you look for these like pieces of light and joy, and how to see them and how to use them actually.
I don't know, during the process of this project and in the past year, I think I've had the opportunity to also connect with my family in a different way. It's not easy. The election of Bolsonaro created a lot of tension in a lot of relationships for a lot of people, and that was also the case in my family. But I've had such interesting conversations with my uncles. I have a huge family. It's such a cliche. you know, the huge Latin American family with like 37 cousins. That's mine. Yeah. So, from one side of the family, plus the other side. So, yeah, it's been so interesting to have conversations with my uncles, like the older generation, and also with my cousins, and connecting with histories that often we don't talk about very much. This is a very common thing in Brazil. For many families, and my family is also guilty of that, of looking more into whatever Europeans you can find in your ancestors and ignoring completely the African and indigenous heritage that we have. And through this process, I've been able to kind of uncover a lot about that, and uncover a lot even about the knowledges. And you know, we're talking about who is an artist and who's allowed to be an artist, but also the knowledges that people had. Like my grandmother, she barely knew how to write, but she knew how to make a lot of herbal remedies. And in a way, it's sad that this knowledge was lost. And I think that was also a product of the industrialization of Brazil throughout the 20th century, because my mom didn't learn from my grandmother, and then I didn't learn. So that was kind of lost. But at the same time, connecting with the fact that she had that knowledge, and that it was actual knowledge, and recognizing that as such, and thinking about even the legacies that, you know, these ancestors have left, has been very, I don't know, it's been very uplifting. And also, whenever I bring up, you know, this issue about knowledges and herbal remedies and all, every place is going to have its own traditions in that sense. So it's also been very nice to connect with people who know about plants that I have no idea of, that come from a completely different context, and they're going to tell me, you know that thing you're seeing growing there? Oh, that does this and this and this, and it's used by these people and these communities in like this specific way. So it's been so interesting and so uplifting also to see how really, I don't know, resistance grows like plants.
Coalitions of radical care,
yeah,
maybe?
Yeah.
So how do we do this? I have a cable, so I cannot send the microphone. But does anyone have a question? Máte niekto otázku? Ak sa necítite v angličtine, tak sa kľudne opýtajte po slovensky, ja to preložím.
I have a question about the abortions in Brazil. You said they were illegal and stigmatized. So is there any underground movement, any alternative movement helping people with the abortions, women with the abortions?
Yeah, there are many movements active in Brazil right now, both fighting in like the legal front, trying to find ways of like legal ways that will eventually like maybe go to the Supreme Court. You know, there's been people working in that sense. There are, of course, underground networks of people who provide abortions, because, you know, it's not because it's illegal that people will stop needing abortions. People will need abortions anyway. And, but it's very concerning, I think, to see, so Deborah Diniz, she is still the head of Instituto Anis, a bioethics institute that is focused on reproductive rights. And they were really, still are, at the forefront of the fight for the legalization of abortion in Brazil. And Deborah was one of the first people who now, in 2019, after Bolsonaro stepped into power, to actually go into exile, because she was getting very credible death threats. We've had quite a few people going into exile at this point. Jean Willis, I don't know if you heard, a very prominent, the first openly gay, very prominent leftist congressman. He had to go into exile. Recently, he is now living in Berlin. Deborah, also Massa Tiburi, a philosopher. So there, yeah, that's quite concerning. But anyway, going back to the abortion networks, of course, you know, there are people providing that. There are people providing that in many different ways. From people who actually use plants and who know how to use plants and provide that service to people, to people who somehow find ways, like there's this organization called Women on Web. It's an organization based in the Netherlands that provides medical abortions to people living in places where abortion is either not accessible or illegal. And so, yeah, this organization also has been trying to help people in Brazil, and also Women Help Women is also another very nice organization. So there's, you know, there's various ways that this is being organized. Yeah. Should we smile more?
Should we smile more?
No, we should scowl.
Should we like frown more? I feel like a lot of these discussions with this reactionary politics that's coming to a new conservative edge, maybe not even edge, maybe we cannot yet see the edge, sadly. But there were a lot of conversations, obviously, here about abortion as well. In the region, obviously, Poland is very contested. And in Slovakia, this was returned to the parliament a few months ago, no? By an extreme right-wing politician, and thank God it didn't pass. But the Confederation of, was it the Confederation that supported, that openly thanked him for bringing this topic up, the Confederation of Bishops. So it's a very bizarre time where we're also, I think, it's gonna, reproductive rights are going to be, and they always have been, but they're going to be yet again the center of discussion very soon, and repeatedly, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even during the Nazi regime, they had, so the control of reproduction really is, I think, a fundamental aspect of authoritarian regimes in general. And during the Nazi regime, for instance, they had a program that was specifically designed for the perpetuation of the white race, called the Lebensborn program. And it's basically a program that was meant to encourage white women to bear white babies, you know. So it's, with the rise of fascism in Europe and elsewhere, it makes sense that this is going to be a very contentious issue. And it's something that, one thing that Angela Davis always says is that, I don't remember the exact words that she used, but it's that, yes, freedom is a constant struggle. It's the title of the book, of course I remember. But it is, like, every right that we have is not secure. And I think it's like a thing of being constantly vigilant. We need to be constantly vigilant. And this is one of the arenas in which fascists will fight that have to fight back in the next years. I mean, you have like, there's Orban in Hungary, and there's Poland, and the situation in Poland is horrendous right now. But what else can we do?
But it's also, I feel like one of the threads is also coming from this like sort of biomedicine sort of perception of world, where there's actually new ways of contraception being developed in sort of with the idea of development or blah blah blah, but they're actually trying to control populations in Africa, like Bill Gates's contraceptive chip.
Yeah, that was one of the things that also. Have you heard of like a contraceptive smart chip? No?
It's an implant.
Yeah, so the Gates Foundation has been funding for the past years a startup called Microchips Biotech, and this company has been developing what they call a smart contraceptive implant. The idea is that they're creating this teeny tiny implant that will inside it have enough hormones for like 10 plus years of contraception. And this chip can be turned on and off through a smartphone. Remotely, yes. And initially, the Gates Foundation has, for a long time, funded a lot of birth control and population control programs in the global south. A lot of them in African countries. And this chip, when it first came out that they were funding this research, what they were saying is that I actually considered putting a video of Melinda Gates talking about their programs in this presentation, but I thought I would run out of time. But basically, their idea, and this is an idea that I've seen even a lot of feminists subscribing to, was that girls in the global south need to have less children so they'll be able to get an education. And to me, that is a very simplistic way to put it, because it doesn't address the various factors that perpetuate poverty. It's this association between a supposed overpopulation, because it's only overpopulation when it's people who are not white, right? It's this association between overpopulation and poverty that disregards completely why those countries, like, you know, colonialism, capitalism, exploitation, all of the factors that are at the root of poverty and misery in the global south, and basically blames all of that into those excessively fertile uteruses, you know. So, yeah, and this chip is meant to be, I've been trying to get more information, because the last information I got about this chip was from around 2016, when they said the chip was going to be ready for distribution, because it's always distributed in the global south before it's sold in the north, was going to be distributed in these programs by 2018, so that would be last year. I haven't found more information, more recent information about this, and yeah, this is definitely something I want to look up in the future.
So this was just a note, as you were saying, that freedom is a constant struggle.
Yeah.
Also, technologies of birth control, racialized technologies of birth control, and very heavy sort of gender division of birth control also is expecting us. Probably it's perpetuated still. So it's not the 50s and the pill.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah.
We always slip back into the conversation. But yes, so does anyone wants to ask something, because we're now at 1 hour and 2 minutes. So if you don't have any questions, we could conclude and maybe have drinks and then talk less formally.
Yes, a beer would be very nice.
Someone can invite Luiza for beer. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks, Kapital, for having us, Luiza specifically, and well, thank you for being here and listening. And let's have non-formal discussions and beers. And Luiza is here the whole evening. You can invite her for something eventually. And a samozrejme vás srdečne pozývame, keď budete mať cestu do Prahy, tak vás srdečne pozývame na Luizinu výstavu v display. To si robím totálne reklamu sama sebe, ale but we would like to invite you, if you are planning a trip to Prague, please come take a look at Luiza's show, because a lot of these works and others are on display, in display. I did it too. Ďakujeme.